Hi, Giannis here from Jagged Verge, and in this episode we will be setting up the environment for the Python point of sale service script. We're going to use this for the rest of the series and for all of the development that we will do from this point onwards on this project. Something that's quite noticeable with this code is that we don't have anything here that's managing the deployment of the code. So we don't have anything like a virtual environment. You don't see any requirements.txt file or anything similar, and you don't see the actual virtual environment directory itself. And the other really noticeable thing is that there is no modules. We've just got this one file, server.py, that has everything in it. Before we go into any significant effort with making modules, or really for that matter doing anything else, we have to address how we're deploying the code. It's very important for us to actually be able to have a reproducible environment in which we can run the code. And by that I mean we want to be able to make sure that despite other changes that are made to the system, we can run the code now and get the same results as running it later. Uh, Unfortunately, the default Python interpreter doesn't quite do this. You can specify which interpreter that you will use in terms of the version and the implementation. So, you can make sure that if you're using Python 2.5, then you can call, CPython 2.5. Or, for example, if you wanted to use Python 3.4, you could call Python 3.4. The problem comes down to packages, though. So, the packages might not end up being the same from one run of the interpreter to another. Now, the way in which this, I guess, problem was solved with this project was basically by setting up, like a virtual box on the server or a virtual machine, and just leaving Python 2.5 on there and not touching it. But I don't think in most cases that's the right way to go about doing things, because like, sure, you'll keep an environment that's the same by setting up a virtual box and just like leaving it, but Python has some better ways of dealing with this problem. I think of those different ways, the virtual env is probably the most convenient. It's one of the easiest ones to deal with, so I've kind of left a link there, and let's have a little look at how you would actually set one of them up. So what we can do is we can create ourselves a new virtual environment, and this basically gives, for those of you who are not familiar with virtual environments, it gives us an isolated Python that'll run our code. So it's not the system Python, but it's its own little copy. The reason this is important is because we don't want to have a situation where unrelated change somewhere else on our default system install of Python changes something, and then changes how the code we're working on will run. So say an upgrade to a package changes the behavior of something, we wouldn't want that upgrade somewhere else to impact our project here. So by putting it in a virtual environment, we are isolating it from the rest of the system, and that lets us get a more producible way of running our code, which is important for us as we go on with this. Now that we've actually set up a virtual environment, we have to use it. If we have a look at Python that would be executed if we type that command at the moment, we'll see that it's in the default location of using Python. That's not really what we want because we just set that up. So what we have to do is we have to actually activate our virtual environment. So now that we've done that, you can see at the beginning of our command line, we are in our virtual environment. So if we call Python again, now you can see that we're actually using the Python in our virtual environment. So now we're actually using that sandbox version of Python, and the changes to the rest of the system won't end up interfering with what we're doing here. Now we can try running the script that we have for the first time. So let's give this a go. As you can see, we're actually missing a library, and this is the MySQLDB connector library. It's a little bit irritating, but I think there's a few different MySQL connection libraries that are, well, case sensitive, but are different. So what we need to do is we need to actually install MySQL library into our virtual environment. So pip install MySQLDB. Oh, so what we've run into here is a problem with our pip version being out of date, which can happen on some of the older Ubuntu versions. I wrote a blog post about this on my personal website a while ago. So what we need to do is use pip to actually upgrade itself. And this should sort out some of our problems here. So that's just installing now. And we'll try that again. So I've got the wrong name. I'll have to quickly look that up. That would be something I would do on the Python packaging index. But actually, I think I remember that it's MySQL Python is the name of this one. So okay, so now this is the right version, and this has to install a couple of things, and let's see if this actually runs our code. Okay, so we see that there is already a problem here, and the problem is that it can't find the C Python log directory or file. Now, the problem with that is that the code was made to be on Windows, and we're running this on Linux. There wasn't actually any particular reason why the code had to only be on Windows. It's just that it's indicative of the bigger problem that has arisen from the original authors developing the code to run on one machine and one machine only. And you can see that in a few other pieces of the code as well, like the hard-coded variables that you have to put your own computer's IP address in and stuff like that. So that's something that we'll jot down that we need to fix in our task program. So we will have to deal with paths in a cross-platform manner. So we don't really want to have any hard-coded paths. Alright, we'll kill this off now. Okay, the keyboard interrupt isn't ending the program. I don't think this is just it being slow. So let's investigate why that happened. Okay. So we have a try and finally here in the main loop. This is a problem because there's no except clause, and when there's no except clause, it's actually the equivalent of having everything caught. That's what that code actually is equivalent to. In case you hadn't seen that before, what it does. Now, I want the keyboard interrupt to actually exit the program, so I want to see accept keyboard interrupt. Okay, so now that's something that we would like to actually have caught before the rest of the exceptions and let us hopefully exit the program. So let's try that again. And alright, so it's still not exiting the program. Often that's a pretty good sign that the program is that there's more than one bare except. So if we have a look into the source again, let's just search for try. Okay, so we have one there, that looks okay. And alright, we now have a bare except that's catching everything. So the problem here is that, you know, in this socket receive function, we press the keyboard interrupt there, that'll get eaten up there as well, even though that has nothing to do with a socket related exception. It'll still be eaten up there. And again, another bare except. So this is a very bad thing to have in your code, because when you have that bare except, the problem is it catches more exceptions than what you would like to catch. In this case, these other bare except blocks are preventing us from using the keyboard interrupt, and they'll also catch other exceptions that really be caught. Like if you got a memory error or something of the sort, it would eat that up, and you really only want those functions there to be catching the socket related exceptions and not just everything. So we need to make a note of that, because it's very important. Deal with bare. So that's quite a high priority task, that, and we definitely need to deal with that, and we'll get around to that at some point in the future. So that's something that we'll have to get back to. Well, we started with setting up a virtual environment, and then we went off on a bit of a diversion there as we were sorting through some problems. So let's finish off the virtual environment stuff. So what we would like to do at this point in time is basically freeze the requirements, and that's the packages, into this requirements.txt. So if we look at that, we'll see that we have the dependencies of wheel and MySQL Python. So at this point in time, we want to first add the changes that we had to the server, which was just adding in that keyboard interrupt and the accept exception to make it a little clearer what we're doing. And we'll add our requirements. Oops, wrong one. Okay, so that pretty much brings the first stage of setting up a virtual environment to a close. Wrapping this episode up, I think it's good to go back and reflect a little bit on just how easy it is when you're dealing with a code base that has multiple issues to get off topic. And we were looking at setting up the virtual environment for the project, And very quickly when we ran it, we ran into another problem. And then when we ran into that problem, we ran into yet another problem that was compounded on top of that. This is something that, as the code quality decreases, you'll run into more and more. And it highlights what I was saying earlier about having to stay organized as you're going along. And by creating these things in the issues tracker that I have here, or the to-do list program essentially, it's helping me keep track of those problems as they came up, but then letting me get back to finishing the task that I started working on in the first place. Without this, and this was what I was like when I was new to refactoring things a few years ago, earlier in my career, I'd find that I'd very quickly get diverted away from the tasks that I was actually working on. So, yeah, I can't recommend being organized with like to-do lists or some way of tracking tasks. I can't like talk highly enough of that. I think it really helps out. As you can see here, we're just starting off, and it's very easy to get distracted by different problems in the course of solving another problem. But you don't want to just let those get forgotten about. And this gives you a way of jotting down the problems so you can clear them out of your mind and get back to working on whatever it is that you're actually working on at the time. And I think with that, it's a good spot to wrap this episode up. Thanks for watching, and tune in next time, and we'll start talking about getting some modules into this code base.